In 2022, the United States government made a promise. Congress passed a law. The president signed it. And the deal was this. America would pay to bring chip manufacturing back home. $39 billion in manufacturing subsidies. Your tax money. And here is what that money is buying. According to the Peterson Institute for International Economics, each job this program creates costs taxpayers $185,000 a year. That is twice the annual salary of the worker doing the job. The most advanced chips in the world, the ones that run your phone, your car, your hospital, your bank, are still being built 90 miles off the coast of China, and they will be for the rest of this decade. That is the ledger. Let's read it. Derek is a construction project manager in Chandler, Arizona. He works on industrial builds, big ones. In 2022, when TSMC broke ground on its first fab outside Phoenix, Derek thought he was watching history. He thought about his kids. He thought about job security. He thought, finally, something coming back. His property taxes went up in 2023 when the city expanded infrastructure to support the project. His federal income taxes helped fund the $6.6 billion grant the government wrote to TSMC, a Taiwanese company, to build those fabs. And the fabs are real, the cranes are real. But the chips being made inside that building right now, they are 2 full generations behind what TSMC makes in Taiwan today. And by Taiwanese law, that gap is not a temporary setback. It is the design. This video is about why. In the next 20 minutes, you're going to understand exactly how America's $39 billion chip reshoring program was structured, and why the country that received the money was always going to keep the most valuable part of it. Here's what we're covering. First, what the CHIPS Act actually promised. Second, the specific law, already on the books in Taiwan, that makes the promise structurally impossible to fully keep. Third, the 3 fabs that show you exactly what happens when the contracts hit reality. Fourth, who knew, who signed anyway, and who is paying. And fifth, what this means for you specifically. By the end of this, you will understand why the United States is manufacturing chips it could not make on its own, at a cost it was never told. Here is what the ledger shows today. Right now, in June 2026, TSMC's fab in Arizona is producing chips. It is real. It is running. Apple buys from it. The node it is running is called 4 nanometer. In Taiwan, TSMC is in full volume production of 2 nanometer chips and actively developing 1.4 nanometer. That is 2 full chip generations of separation. In semiconductors, 1 generation is roughly 3 to 4 years of research, capital investment, and ecosystem development. So the gap between what America is building and what Taiwan is keeping is not a year. It is the better part of a decade. And here is the part that matters. That gap exists by law. Taiwanese regulations, specifically a rule called the N1 policy, require that TSMC's overseas fabs operate at least 1 full technology generation behind whatever Taiwan is running domestically. TSMC cannot legally transfer its most advanced process technology to foreign soil while it is still Taiwan's leading node. The Arizona fab is not behind because of construction delays. It is behind because Taiwan decided it would be. But this was not always the arrangement. Go back to 1987. A Taiwanese engineer named Morris Chang, fresh off a long career at Texas Instruments, proposed something that had never existed before, a company that would only manufacture chips. No designs, no products of its own, just fabs, open to any company in the world that needed its circuits turned into silicon. TSMC was born as an outsourcing platform. The United States, running the most sophisticated chip design ecosystem in the world, Intel, AMD, Qualcomm, Texas Instruments, saw it as a gift. You design it, we'll build it. Cheap, fast, world-class. For 2 decades, that trade worked. American companies kept the intellectual property. Taiwan kept the fabs. The US stayed dominant in the part it wanted. But while American chip makers were celebrating design wins, Taiwan was doing something quieter. It was learning that whoever controls the fabrication process controls the entire value chain, not just the building, the molecule-level precision, the yield rates, the chemistry, the 3,000 steps it takes to turn raw silicon into a processor that will fit inside a hearing aid. By 2010, TSMC wasn't just a manufacturer, it was the choke point. The United States didn't notice because the chips kept coming. American companies kept designing. Taiwan kept building. The supply chain hummed along until it didn't. 2021, the pandemic exposed what the supply chain had quietly become over 30 years. Ford lost $2.5 billion in revenue waiting for chips. Auto dealers had empty lots. PlayStation 5s were selling for 3 times their retail price. Medical devices were delayed. Defense contracts were threatened. And the United States discovered something uncomfortable. It had offshored the thing you cannot offshore, the physical ability to make the technology that runs everything. So in 2022, Congress did what governments do when they need to fix a 30-year mistake quickly. They wrote a very large check and called it a strategy. Here is how the CHIPS Act was structured, and why that structure is the story. Imagine you own the best restaurant in the world, the recipes, the trained chefs, the suppliers who grow your ingredients to specification, the front-of-house team that has worked together for 15 years. Someone comes to you and says, "We'll pay for you to open a second location in Arizona," and you say, "Great, we'll open it." But the Michelin star recipes? Those stay at the original. The Arizona location will serve the menu from 5 years ago. That is what the CHIPS Act funded. Here is how the money actually moved. Step 1. In August 2022, Congress passed the CHIPS and Science Act, $52 billion total, with $39 billion going to manufacturing incentives. TSMC, Samsung, Intel, Micron, and others were invited to apply. Step 2. The grant awards came fast. TSMC won $6.6 billion in direct grants plus $5 billion in loans for 3 Arizona fabs. Samsung won $4.7 billion for Texas. Intel won $8.5 billion for Ohio and Arizona. Combined, nearly $20 billion to 3 companies, 2 of which are headquartered outside the United States. Step 3. The grants came with strings, profit-sharing clauses, workforce requirements, limits on investing in China. What they did not come with was a binding requirement to transfer leading-edge technology to American soil. And here is why that omission matters. Every chip fab is not the same. A chip fab making 4-nanometer chips is not a practice run for a fab making 2-nanometer chips. It is a completely different manufacturing process, different materials, different equipment, different chemistry, different levels of atomic scale precision. When people talk about chip generations, 4 nanometers, 3 nanometers, 2 nanometers, they're talking about how many transistors can fit on a chip the size of your fingernail. The more transistors, the more processing power. The more processing power, the more valuable the chip. The chips that run the most advanced AI systems, the ones powering data centers that already affect your job, your mortgage application, your insurance premium, those are made at 2 nanometers and below. Today, Taiwan makes them. America cannot. Not because the fabs aren't built, because Taiwanese law says they cannot. Taiwan's Ministry of Economic Affairs has confirmed it publicly. Quote, TSMC cannot produce 2-nanometer chips overseas currently. Its core technology will stay in Taiwan. That statement was made before a single CHIPS Act dollar was spent. Now look at what happened to the 3 biggest bets. TSMC Arizona. The first fab, Fab 21 Phase 1, is running. It produces 4-nanometer chips. For Apple, that is real, but the second fab, where 3-nanometer chips will eventually be made, doesn't begin equipment installation until later this year. Volume production isn't expected until 2027. The third fab, the one the government used in press conferences as proof the plan was working, begins construction now. It produces 2-nanometer chips. In 2030, at the earliest. Meanwhile, in Taiwan, TSMC is making 2-nanometer chips today and is developing 1.4-nanometer. The gap does not close. It shifts forward in time. Samsung, Texas. Samsung's Taylor, Texas plant started as a $17 billion investment. It ended up above $25 billion, a cost overrun of more than $8 billion before production began. Construction delays, labor shortages, customer shortfalls. Samsung delayed mass production twice. The facility still has not generated the jobs its press release promised. Intel, Ohio. This one deserves its own moment. In 2022, Intel announced a $20 billion semiconductor campus in New Albany, Ohio. 2 fabs. Thousands of jobs. The governor was there. The senators were there. It was called the largest private sector investment in Ohio history. Target completion, 2025. Today, in 2026, neither fab is finished. Intel has pushed production back twice. The first fab now targets 2030. The second, 2031. That is a 6-year delay from the original promise. Here's the part that did not make the press release. Intel received CHIPS Act funding while simultaneously cutting more than 20% of its global workforce. The same year the company collected a federal subsidy check, it was eliminating the employees it had already hired in preparation for the Ohio build. And the 3,500 jobs originally promised to New Albany, they were removed from the planning documents, quietly, no press conference, no senator standing at a podium explaining what changed. The announcement was national news. The revision was a footnote. That is how this program was designed to work. The government announces, the company commits, the jobs get written into the headline. And when the numbers change, when the delays hit, when the costs overrun, when the workforce reductions come, those revisions happen in regulatory filings that nobody reads. 3 fabs, 3 promises, 3 different stories, the same math underneath all of them. Here's where the design of this program breaks into the open. The CHIPS Act was sold on 2 arguments: national security, reduce dependence on Taiwan in case of conflict with China, economic security, bring good-paying manufacturing jobs back to America. Let's run both arguments against the ledger. On national security, as of today, Taiwan will still account for approximately 85% of TSMC's advanced node chip capacity by 2030, even after all the US investments are complete. The fabs being built in Arizona produce chips that are, by law, at least 1 full generation behind Taiwan's leading edge. The most advanced AI chips, the most advanced defense chips, the most advanced chips that determine technological supremacy, those are still being made in a place that China has publicly said it intends to unify with by force if necessary. The United States spent $39 billion to move the risk from 100% of Taiwan's production to 85% of Taiwan's production. That is not independence. That is a press release. On jobs. The Peterson Institute ran the math on every CHIPS Act award. Each permanent job the program creates will cost taxpayers $185,000 per year in subsidies. The average U.S. semiconductor employee earns about $92,500 a year, which means the subsidy for 1 chip job costs more than 2 chip jobs worth of salary. You are paying twice the worker's wage in taxes for the privilege of that worker having a job. And in February 2026, when U.S. trade negotiators sat down with Taiwan's Vice Premier Chang to push for moving 40% of Taiwan's semiconductor production to America, she said, and I am quoting directly, "That is impossible. Taiwan's science parks will not be relocated to the United States. Our most advanced semiconductor technology will not be transferred." That meeting happened while the U.S. government was still disbursing grant payments, while the press releases about American chip independence were still going out. The crack is not that the plan failed. The crack is that the people designing the plan already knew what impossible meant, and they signed the checks anyway. Remember that $185,000 per job figure from the top of this video? Here is exactly what that looks like in specific American households. Derek, construction project manager. Chandler, Arizona. Derek did get work from the TSMC build. Some of his peers did too. But the project's direct construction jobs were partially filled by workers and engineers flown in from Taiwan because the US didn't have enough specialists on the ground. His property taxes went up. His roads got more congested. The chips being made a few miles from his house are the same generation his iPhone was running 2 years ago. Maria, automotive line worker. Toledo, Ohio. Maria's plant uses chips. A lot of them. In 2021 and 2022, her line shut down for weeks because the chips weren't there. She lost shifts. She lost income. She was told the CHIPS Act would fix that. Intel's Ohio Fabs, the ones sold as the solution to exactly the crisis Maria lived through, will not be operational until 2030 or 2031 at the earliest. The next time a geopolitical event disrupts the Taiwan Strait, Maria's line will face the same shutdown. Same chips, same island, same risk. James, software engineer. Austin, Texas. James works at a company that uses NVIDIA chips to run AI inference for its product. Those chips are made at TSMC in Taiwan. At nodes that will not arrive in the United States this decade. When his company talks about US AI sovereignty, the chips powering that sovereignty are physically located on an island of 23 million people with 1,400 Chinese missiles pointed at it. And your share of the $39 billion in chip manufacturing subsidies is roughly $298 per household. That money went to companies with a combined market cap in the trillions. In exchange, America got fabs that are legally 2 generations behind the technology that matters, construction timelines measured in decades, and a geopolitical dependency that went from 100% of one island to 85% of one island. The promise was chip independence. The ledger shows something else. The receipts tell a different story. The CHIPS Act was not a failure of intent. It was a failure of design. Congress wrote a $39 billion check to foreign companies to build fabs on American soil, without requiring that those fabs ever house America's most important technology. Taiwan's law was already written. The N-1 rule was already in place. TSMC's CFO said publicly that the most advanced processes require very deep collaboration between design and manufacturing teams that can only happen in Taiwan. Taiwan's Minister of Economic Affairs said publicly that the most advanced nodes would legally remain in Taiwan. Every person who signed those grant agreements had access to all of that. What America bought with $39 billion was not chip independence. It was slightly diversified chip dependency at $185,000 per job per year in perpetuity. The cranes are real. The fabs are real. The gap is real. The ledger doesn't lie. If this is the first video you've landed on, This is what we do here. The story underneath the story. Subscribe to American Ledger Journal. Hit the bell so the next one finds you. And if this gave you something worth passing on, send it to someone who needs it.